So this is part 7 of the Project Phoenix, and we are really delighted and honored to have Jason Castriota with us today. You are the man who were in charge of Saab design and the Phoenix project. So big welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to revisit this really fascinating footnote in automotive history.
Yes, so you need to tell us all about how you started with Saab and all these projects, but we will go through everything. But there's a lot of questions, and we are really eager to have your opinion and why you did what you did and how it was to work with Saab that back in that days and so on. So why don't you just kick off how did you come to Saab? Why did you choose to work for Saab, and when?
Oh, well, that's a great story. So to begin with, I don't know if many of you remember, but back in the day, Swede and I spoke, and I mentioned that my first car was a Saab. So my first car when I was 16 years old, believe it or not, was a Saab 900. And my parents had owned Saabs prior to that, so I was very much a Saab guy. And so when I ran into Victor Muller at the LA Auto Show in 2009, actually, it was very clear he had something interesting going on. Nothing had been announced yet, but he said, "Oh, we have to catch up. I'm about to go meet with GM." And I had left Pininfarina and Bertone at that point. I'd spent roughly a decade in Italy working at these phenomenal historic carrozzerias, working with Ferrari and Maserati and all these incredible iconic brands. And that's how I actually got to know Victor. Victor was a big car collector at the time. And so I actually met Victor on the stand at Geneva years prior when I was introducing one of the Ferraris. I was responsible for the 599. And we became, let's say, automotive acquaintance friends in those years where we would see each other at Pebble Beach and Geneva and different shows and talk cars and talk design. And he was always an incredibly passionate, admirer of design and was a big fan of my work. And so fast forward to Geneva of 2010, and he spotted me through the crowd, which was easy for Victor because Victor is incredibly tall. So he spotted me through the crowd. He said, "Jason," he said, "where are you? What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I've left Italy. I'm running my own design consultancy. It's fantastic. I'm living back home in New York, and I'm really happy. I have a small child, and so our family unit's tight, and it's great." And he said, he's like, "You have to come to Saab." He had just closed the deal with Saab, and I said, "Wow, Saab, that sounds like a big lift. I'm not so sure." He said, no, you have to come to Saab. You have to come to Saab. It's, I need you. We need something really bold and exciting and that understands heritage. And, this is exactly what you've been doing at Pininfarina for all those years. So, we really want you to come. And I said, okay. I said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we have a conversation and then, we'll explore the opportunity. So we had a conversation. I got to meet Janake. Who was the CEO, of course, at the time, and a true gentleman. And I really appreciated Janake and his thoughtfulness and his approach. And I thought that he and Victor were actually very interesting yin yang because Victor is all fire and passion, and Janake is very Swedish cool. So very, 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 very yin yang, very balanced between the two of them. And I said, wow, this is crazy enough that it could just work. So. At the time, I also knew that Victor had a backer, a very prominent backer. And that gave me also a bit more confidence that, okay, if I dived into this, this could really go somewhere. And we really have an opportunity to do something with this incredible brand that, at the time, we kind of referred to Saab as a 50-year-old startup, because it had this incredible history. Saab always punched above its weight. It was always a brand that, created very iconic, characterful, even quirky cars. A lot of innovation for such a small company. And that was something that just was very near and dear to me. And so, we did an initial project brief, and I said to them, okay, give us a month and we'll come back to you with an idea of what we can do for you. And, from there, we agreed to meet at the New York Auto Show, which was at that time in April. So just, really a month and a half after the Geneva Auto Show. And sure enough, my team, which was a lot of ex Pininfarina Ferrari people that I brought with me, we had already been working very heavily digitally. So we were doing digital design really at the forefront, where everything was digital. We weren't even doing physical models anymore, because we were also very engineering focused. So everything from the package architecture to thermodynamics, aerodynamics, these were all things we wanted to layer in from the beginning to really come out of the gate with a very real, very industrialized design, even from the first concept. And to the shock of Janake and Victor, that's exactly what we showed. So we showed a very heavily engineered proposal for the 9.3. They did not expect this. And at that point, I'll paraphrase what Janake said. Janake said, if you can make this work, this is going to be very successful. So that was really, from there, we closed the deal. So it was quite a brief courtship. But they were really impressed in terms of our team's capability of actually doing something out of the gate that had very high level of feasibility. And that was what really sold them. And there was, some character to the design, which really I wanted to tap back into not just the 900, but even the 9.1, and really try to bridge that whole history of Saab. And that was directionally where we were going.
Great, great story. How was the culture transformation from Italy to quirky little Swedish brand Saab?
Cold, very cold, and a bit dark. I was used to, obviously Italy is very vibrant and colorful, and going into a Trollhättan winter was definitely shocking. Yes. But what I really appreciated about the team there is, the Saab people were Saab people. They really they knew the brand. They loved the brand. It was a smaller team, which I also appreciated, because I was always working in very small teams. We would always marvel at these big giant companies and how many people they needed to create something, when and listen, maybe this is part of the advantage that a Ferrari has, but when you have such a singular focus on what you are as a brand and what you want to create, you need a very small group of people, and you can go and you can execute and you can do really amazing things. And I really felt that spirit at Saab. I really understood how and why Saab could fight for so many years, being such a small company, keeping as much independence as they could, even though they were part of obviously a much larger group at that time. And the purchase by Spyker, of course, that enabled it to once again really return to its roots, which we were all really excited about, because we no longer had a big board of people who would argue, well, how does this work with the rest of this gigantic portfolio? This was really now about, how do we go and make the best Saab, and what is the best Saab? And I think that's also something that's really unique about the Phoenix platform, the Phoenix show car, and what we were building with the next generation 9.3. And ultimately our dream to also build a 9.1, or a 9.2, as Victor would call it, a small car, because, it gave us the ability to distill Saab down to its core ethos of what it really meant to a customer. And, of course, the safety was always there, but so was performance. There was always this left and right brained element to Saab vehicles that were pragmatic yet emotive. And I think they did that in a really unique way. And that's really what we wanted to capture.
How was it to work with Victor Muller? Did he interfere with the design sketches? And
Victor, from that standpoint, is a dream, because Victor is, first off, he has phenomenal car culture. He's incredible. Once upon a time, he had just an enormous car collection of everything beautiful from every car maker you could imagine. So he's somebody so richly steeped in car culture and design. And because of that, he also brings with that a certain reverence to people who really are excellent at their craft. And so with Victor, it was really about, he wanted to be the conductor of the orchestra, really said, okay, I'm going to have great people, and I'm going to give these people the ability to do what they do best. And so whether it was Mats on the engineering side or myself on the design side, he really just wanted to enable us. And if anything, Victor was the greatest champion, because he understood that part of the challenge that really most brands have had over the last, let's say, 20 years at that time in particular, was that the vehicle architecture, because of from partly from inherited engine transmission position, where you get this very long front overhang, whereas premium architecture, as we know, was always a shorter front overhang and a bit more dash to axle. These created engineering challenges and cost challenges. And Victor and Mats and I worked very hard together to really push massive architecture change that was going to make the vehicle more premium. In fact, in parallel, Audi did the same thing. So in the Walter de Silva era of Audi, if you remember, the A4 all of a sudden grew this BMW 3 Series C-Class like proportion. It no longer had the big, was way out there. You know, whereas, you know, we always wanted to have that just like all the great Saab concept cars that were done in that generation prior to me arriving. You know, those cars were all beautiful. They had these incredibly tight front overhangs, you know, the wheels out at the corners, really allowed that, you know, more aerospace-like aesthetic, you know, really, really beautiful vehicles that we also wanted to capture some of that, but finally in a production vehicle.
So could you walk us through the concept car? That was the first one you made, right? Was it?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Was that the first you designed?
For Saab, yes. Yeah. So prior to that, the concept car that I was most known for is actually, it's a picture behind me, is the Maserati Birdcage 75. And so that was in 2005. That was built on the Maserati, the racing version of the Maserati MC12, the MCC race car chassis. And that was really the time to return back to the roots of great Italian dream car design, where back in the 60s and 70s, the Pininfarinas, the Bertones, and others would take these race car chassis and just create these incredible rolling sculptures. And so that was my opportunity to do that. And it coincided with the 75th anniversary of Pininfarina, which was a great honor. We were working very closely with Maserati. The products I worked with Maserati were launching after that. So it was a great precursor to what was to come. So when we came to Saab, we really wanted to achieve the same thing. We wanted to create something incredibly bold, incredibly beautiful. But we also knew we really needed to stretch the bandwidth, because the goal at Saab, from my perspective, from a design, a brand, and a marketing perspective, was we needed to use design to change the conversation. You have to remember that under GM, Saab did, you know, 10 years of really beautiful concept cars, many beautiful concept cars, but none of them made it to production. And they were true concept cars. They weren't built on anything resembling a real chassis. They were drawn up by talented designers and artists and sculpted and built. And yes, they ran, but they weren't real cars. There's a big gap between a concept car and a show car and a production car. Our goal was to actually do something that, believe it or not, underneath the skin was a real car.
It was?
And that, yes. And as you guys know, it was a real car underneath the skin. That we actually had the Phoenix chassis. It actually had the BMW Mini power plant with the torque vectoring axle from American Axle. This was a real car. And we were going to then push the design language, because the idea with design is you really need to stretch the public's, let's say, acceptance of what was new and innovative. So then by the time you get to market a few years later, there's already really an understanding around it. And look, you can look at any number of really radical designs, even the Cybertruck, you know, which Franz and Tesla did not so long ago. When that first came out, it was so jarring. And now you see it, and certainly in certain markets, like, you know, if you're in Los Angeles or Miami, there's quite a few of them. It's just like another car. It's amazing how even a really exceptionally bold, radical, controversial design, after enough time, just becomes, oh yeah, that's the Cybertruck, and it doesn't jar you anymore. Okay. So what we needed to do with design, in particular with this show car, was change the narrative. And what do I mean by that? The narrative, every interview that Victor gave, every interview that Mats gave, every interview that I gave, the number one question is, yeah, this sounds great, but will Saab survive?
Yeah.
Yeah, this sounds great, but do you really have the money? Yeah, this sounds great, but are you sure you're going to survive? Like, that was the narrative. The narrative was we were just, you know, waiting to die, essentially. And so the best way to flip that narrative was to create something to change the narrative. So what actually started out, let's say, less extreme in the initial concept sketches got more extreme. And the reason I made it more extreme was because it allowed us, in every conversation I had from Geneva onwards, it was, wow, is this the future of Saab? Bit of a magic trick, you know, because it changed the journalist narrative from, are you going to survive, to, wow, what does this mean about the future of Saab?
Yes.
So that's a very powerful thing. And the other thing that's really important to note, and this was not yet, let's say, part of normal business in automotive, but we were on the very cutting edge of using the latest marketing techniques to track social media conversation. And so, believe it or not, at the Geneva Auto Show, the Phoenix actually tracked way higher than everything else that was there, in part because of the controversy of design, in part because of the conversation that I had with another designer about it that went viral. You know, but ultimately, what it did was, above all, was it ushered in a new, younger generation of consumer who before wouldn't have looked at a Saab, who now said, wow, Saab, this is this really cool thing that's coming. So that's the other thing. As a designer, you know, especially if you have a brand that, let's say, is a little bit longer in the tooth or has had a difficult history, you've got to reset that brand. You're not trying to reset it with your customers today. You really need to say, okay, I've got to buy a new generation into this brand. And that generation may be 20 or even 30 years younger than my client today. And that was really the case with Saab. With Saab, we were saying, okay, look, we've got great customers. You know, I'm sure you guys know the data. Saab was always heralded for having the smartest, most educated, highest household income customer of any premium car brand, believe it or not. It was always called the doctor, lawyer, engineer car, right?
Yes.
You know, and that's something we were very proud about. But when your customer becomes to be 55, 60 years old, you need to really be concerned, okay, how do I capture the hearts and minds and wallets of a 20-year-old? Because that's the person that then is going to grow into the brand, and they're going to buy the product for another 20 or 30 years. So these are some of the challenges we were facing, and that gives you a little bit of the context as why it was so pushed.
Yeah, so could you explain the car for those who hasn't seen it? What was the main attractions with the car?
Yeah, so, well, let me do this, and I'm sure you guys can pause the video. I can pull some imagery up, and we can, you know, we can put together some sketches, and then, or actually, maybe I'll start by showing you images of the car. So these are my favorite photos, because these were taken actually at about 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning in Manhattan, when we brought the car to the New York Auto Show. And understand, for me, you know, I grew up as a kid going to the New York Auto Show. So to be able to go there with Saab to present the concept car I designed for Saab, to talk about the future of Saab, that was a really exciting moment. You know, unfortunately, Saab was not in a great position at the time. But we see, I think this image, you know, as a designer, you know, the two things that I focus on are what I like to refer to as the volumes of the car. So really, literally the form of the car, and then how light moves across that form. That to me is the most important thing. And so what you should be able to see here very clearly is this very aeronautical, almost bullet-like nose, which then the entire body stretches back like a teardrop. So again, really underlining the aerospace roots of Saab. Then you have this canopy, this teardrop-like canopy that again also stretches rearward. And then the more controversial element, of course, is this kind of buttress, which is almost like a scarf blowing in the wind coming off of the canopy. And these elements together work together to give you a sense that this thing is you know, let's say very fluid through the air, moving through the air in an incredibly efficient, you know, almost aeronautical precision. The wheels, of course, mimic the turbine of a jet engine. And then, you know, this car was very ahead of its time in the sense that we were already incorporating a lot of advanced aerodynamic techniques that are now pretty much used in most every car. But again, this was, you know, again, we designed this car in 2010. So, you know, now it's 16 years old, believe it or not.
It looks really, really fresh, I must say.
I appreciate that.
It looks like it could be done now.
That would be, you know, I mean, again, had we been able to continue Saab design, I mean, certainly we would have gotten there eventually. Here's a rear view, you know, and again, now you can really see, I'll zoom in a little bit, actually. Again, you see that teardrop canopy stretching back. You see this large graphic panel with this almost 80s era type graphics, which, by the way, now are in vogue. So if you look at all the recent concept cars, everybody's now doing this. At the time, it was very criticized, but here we are. You know, it's again, if you think about the modernity and the fluidity of the design, it really does speak to this, you know, this airfoil wrapped around this teardrop, which again underlines really, again, that aerospace roots. And then, you know, for the true Saabophiles in the world, you'll see in the rear, we were able to use, I'll zoom in again, the Saab airplane logo, which the family and Saab Aerospace were kind enough to allow us to use for this concept car, which really meant something, because again, we really wanted to say, you know, we're returning to the roots of what Saab is about. I'll pull up a couple other images. Hold on.
So how long did you work before you managed to produce such a car?
So, believe it or not, this car, we did this car in about, oh boy, we started it in October and it was on the stand at Geneva in March. So it was 6 months. It was an incredibly intense, right out of the shot build. And there wasn't a lot of time, to me, I personally as a designer like the forcing factor of tight timelines because it doesn't allow you to overthink and it doesn't allow you to water things down. And that's for better or for worse. You're going to get, what I kind of refer to as the errant brushstroke, or the, here it is with a New York taxi cab in daylight, which is quite dramatic. You're going to get things that, of course, in hindsight, you say, boy, I do that a little differently. But the whole point of a concept car, again, is to make a statement. And it's to put out a vision of a different world, and then let people kind of adapt to that. And then somewhere along the way, you'll kind of begin to fill in those gaps with products that lean towards that concept car. But that's really to me the true spirit of a concept car. It
was built in Trollhättan, was it?
So it was built. So the chassis was built in Trollhättan, and then the body was built in Italy. So we did the final construction in Italy. We were up all night the night before Geneva. We put it on a truck and we drove it up to Geneva. I think there were still guys in the truck screwing some things and holding some things down with glue. But that's kind of very. For anybody that built show cars in Turin for the Geneva Auto Show, which was pretty much every automaker in the world at the time, that was part and parcel. The joke was, all of these trucks that were shipping cars up to Geneva on February 27th or 28th, there was 5 guys in the back working on the cars at the same time.
But then I have a question.
Yes.
So does that mean that the base structure of this car is essentially a 9.3 or Saab 9.3?
Correct. It's a shortened wheelbase. So the base structure of this car would have been, in my view, the goal of this car was eventually to turn this car into 2 other products. So there was the 9.3. This is a shortened wheelbase of the 9.3, but your overhang, your dash to axle, your wheel and tire diameter are all real. This is critical because I didn't do what we typically do on show cars where we blow up the wheel and tire diameter. Here it was actually production wheel and tire diameter, and even the clamshell hood, believe it or not, we had that going into production on the 9.3, and I'll show you that later. But the goal was to, again, have this modular platform where we could produce the 9.3, which again is a longer wheelbase, 5-door, of course, hatchback. Then we had the convertible version of that car, which had the same wheelbase. I can show you a picture of that in a moment as well. And then there we wanted to shrink the wheelbase and do a 2+2 or a small 4-seater. Let's call it a 9.2 Saab, which was Victor's dream. And then I wanted to build a production version of this, which would have been the modern Sonett, essentially. That was kind of the idea.
And where is this car now?
This car does not exist anymore, sadly. My understanding is that this car was sitting in storage in Trollhättan, and at some point, unfortunately, met an untimely demise in a crusher, which is incredibly disappointing. I really don't know the politics behind it. There's obviously dispute about ownership, and IP and what have you, and I think that it's just an unfortunate reality that occurred. It's a shame. I would have loved to personally. I would have loved to purchase it myself had I had the opportunity.
Yes. Who thought about it? Where were the clash?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Years and years and years ago, and I mean now I'm talking at least 12 or 13 years ago. When actually it's more than that. It was post Saab bankruptcy. We were talking with a couple groups, including Nevs, about, the 9.3 and forwarding the 9.3 program. We talked also about the Phoenix show car. At one point, it was in the museum. I remember Peter had it in the museum.
Wow.
And then it disappeared into a warehouse. And again, unfortunate. I honestly wish someone would have contacted me because I would have liked to try to get it at some point. It would just be nice to have. But it was a really fun project. Try to find a picture of don't know if I have, oh yeah, here's a picture of the interior.
Interior, yeah, the interior is also very Saabish and futuristic.
Yeah, the interior was fantastic. You know, kudos to the team. They just did a fantastic job, and we captured that right blend of Saab and kind of modern, you know, interior design and furniture design, which, you know, was very cockpit oriented for the driver, but yet there was this sense of, you know, quiet luxury and but with the fun poppy colors. That, you know, you kind of equate with modern, you know, Swedish furniture. So yeah, it was really a fun project, and so much of this, let's say the spirit of this was going to make it into production, and that was what was really exciting about what we were building.
Yes. So talk us through to the production car, the 9.3 then.
Can I with the Phoenix, I have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
If you want to answer, Jason, then we can edit it out afterwards. But if someone comes and they would like to have a Phoenix car themselves based on your design, it sounds to me like that should be possible, right?
I own the IP, so yeah, it would technically be possible. You know, it wouldn't be. I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't dislike making one if someone asked.
Good. That's happy to hear that. I haven't had any request yet, but then I know if someone asks.
Wow, that's a brilliant future. I think people would adore this car if it went, reality.
Let me. I'll show you some sketches of this car, and then I'll show you sketches of the Saab 9.3, and then pictures of the Saab 9.3. Which, okay, so here we go. Share my window. I've gotten better at this. So I'll zoom in here. Actually, this is the key sketch. So here, as you know, for Saabophiles, the Saab, and you know, really a phenomenal piece of automotive design and engineering, and laid the groundwork for all Saabs. And look, for the let's say Saab expert, and let's say if you just put this in front of someone else in the automotive, let's say you know, a fan of automobiles, they would also probably cite, you know, a Porsche 911 or a Carrera 356. You know, there's a very similar train of thought with this teardrops laid on top of each other. Beneath that, you see my first kind of theme sketch for the Phoenix, and you know, the way that, you know, I wanted to modernize it was just to give it a bit more wedge. You know, we know with aerodynamics now, actually, you know, while yes, the sloping canopy, rear canopy is very efficient for airflow, that air does detach and then create turbulence and lift. So what's inevitably happened, and if you look at a modern 911, that rear is cranked up quite a bit versus how they used to be for that exact reason. So this was really the same approach. It was taking a modern aerodynamic approach, saying, okay, we're gonna lean on these teardrop forms. We're going to lean on this very fast fluid form, but we're going to also, you know, respect where aerodynamics, what we know today. And so, you know, this is kind of where I always begin. I begin with a very abstract theme sketch. And so here, breaking down the Saab into its purest volumes, and then saying, okay, in a modern interpretation, what I'm really going to do is I'm going to raise that. I'm going to create a cam tail, because that detaches the airflow very efficiently. And then underneath the car, I'm going to have a giant diffuser, which helps suck air out from behind the car, which again creates pressure, creates downforce without creating drag. So this was the whole concept here. And just to give you an idea, at the time, the average car on the market had a CX of around 3.2, and a Saab Phoenix was 2.5. We were fantastically aerodynamic. And this is before some of the latest tricks that we now know have come into play, where we could easily get that down to a 2.1 or a 2. You know, and but this was very advanced for the time. There was really nothing in the market, you know, in that size that had that kind of aerodynamic efficiency. And that was something that, again, was going to be very, very important to, you know, where, oops, hold on, sorry. There we go. You can see that.
Yeah.
And so again, here you see kind of that lineage, you know, in the nose, the face we were creating is I really wanted the blades of the Saab logo to stretch into the lamps, to really give you that feel of that, you know, again, that old graphic, actually, the old logo of the jet airplane, you know, with the engines hanging off the wings. And that was really thematically you know, what we were looking to create. Let's see here. And then on this, you can see here, these became kind of the key design elements that we were then going to carry into other Saab vehicles. So it was this really, again, pure, I'll zoom in, this very pure teardrop form, which then I also repeated on the wheel arches, or the brows as we kind of refer to them. And if you recall that the original 9.1 had those kind of brows over the wheel arch as well. So again, it's a bit of nod to the history, the entire history of Saab design, from the 9.1 to the 900 to the you know, the great Michael Maurer era of the, you know, the GM owned Saab concept cars, and Anthony Lowe, you know, the great cars they did. And then, you know, bringing in, you know, a certain level of modernity, you know, into this connected graphic, which was very, at the time, avant-garde. Now it's very normal. I think you see it on pretty much every German car, every Chinese car, you know, have all embraced this. And then, of course, you know, very importantly, that teardrop canopy to again underpin the aerodynamic efficiency and the aerospace roots. And in fact, you can even see here the body itself is a teardrop, and then those rear hips, you know, kind of the body actually tapers into those rear hips to give you that stronger rear hip, and then tapers again. And those were the kind of the key design elements that we wanted to explore. And then, you know, these were some very early kind of, you know, quick renderings I did to, you know, again, get that gesture of the vehicle. And then that's, you know, that's what resulted in that. And as I said, is a very quick, very quick project, but you know, very, very fun.
Was it Trollhättan speed, or was it Jason speed?
I have to say, we were definitely working at Jason speed. I think I think we were trying to implement a new way of doing things. And listen, that was not without its challenges. Just from the standpoint that, you know, there's always a fine line when you are working with a new team of people who have their, let's say, their work culture, the manner in which they typically work, the cadence that they work. And then, you know, at the time, and I'll admit this, we were, you know, my team and I were a bit of a bull in the China shop, because we were put a tremendous amount of pressure on us by Victor and others to say, look, we've got to get there. We've got to move fast. We've got to kind of, you know, almost Silicon Valley, like move fast and break things. And that was challenging for the team. And it was challenging to, you know, do that initial integration of the team. But, you know, again, the internal team at Saab did the interior, and they did a phenomenal job, you know, so, you know, Ola and the guys that worked on it did such a fantastic job. You know, so it really ended up being a great collaboration that I think a lot of people could be very proud about. And I think that's the key. You know, again, we just, you know, ran out of time to do all the things we wanted to do. Yeah.
How was the economic pressure on you?
The economic pressure was real, because, you know, ultimately, you know, I walked into the Saab deal, you know, feeling that very confident we had the 3 years to do what we needed to do. And 3 years was always going to be very difficult. That's China speed. You know, I mean, that's, you know, traditional OEMs are working on a 6-year timeline. You know, we're saying, okay, we're gonna come to market with an all new car and an all new platform in 3 years. And in that 3 years, we've got to introduce a new design language. We've got to get the market ready, and we've got to, you know, build confidence along the way. And so, you know, tremendous amount of pressure, especially because unfortunately, you know, 6 months into this, the challenges already began. You know, we were already in that point where, you know, there were burblings about, you know, suppliers being unhappy, and there was difficulty getting in the funding that Victor had lined up to get into the company. And yeah, those were things that, you know, in our department, we tried to block out, but I also had to be very honest with the team. And this was one of the forcing factors I had to implement. I had to be honest with them and say, guys, you know, this is still a company that is not yet firmly with its feet on the ground. You know, we need to make some sacrifices here. We've got to work fast, and I understand that it's frustrating to, you know, just be told to all of a sudden work twice as fast or twice as much or in a new way, and that's all very disorienting. But the alternative was death, you know, as a company. So, you know, again, you try to balance these things. You're never going to get it all right. I think for me personally, it was a phenomenal learning curve. What to do, what not to do, more what not to do, you know, and come out of it smarter, better for it, for sure.
Okay.
Let's I'll dig up let me dig up the Saab 9.3 actually, which some photos of this leaked out once upon a time. You know,
were there any cars built on the 9.3, or was it just a show car that was built?
So we did have a couple of prototypes, you know, which was great. But you know, obviously, you know, it's just a shame that we couldn't get more traction with these cars. Yeah, this was a really beautiful sketch by Ola. Some really nice detail work. You know, again, I love the steering wheel in particular. We really wanted to capture that yoke aesthetic, which yet wasn't a thing. You know, now, as you know, Tesla, you know, with the Cloud introduced the true yoke. And what we had done at the time is we made the upper transparent. So, you know, this was actually translucent, and, you know, then the leather bound was just the true yoke, which was quite cool. Here's actually the final show car version of that. So you can see the translucent Perspex, and then, you know, the modeled yoke, which was quite cool. It's
very much a car mixed with an airplane.
Yes. Yeah, that was really, and I think now when you look back at it in hindsight, you could see that even more. You know, this is I love the top view photo. It's very cool. We had some very good photo shoots with the car. So
how do you think this excuse me, this interior would stand out today if you know, looking like this?
Even at the time, the interior was universally praised. I had quite a few design directors at the time, most notably Jay Mays, who was head of Ford at the time. Absolutely loved. He loved the whole car, but he was like, the interior is unbelievable. He was really it was really well received. Again, I think the team did a great job. It's just, it really captured that, to your point, that aerospace, bringing that into a Saab road car, underlining that heritage, and doing it in a new way that also allowed color, because that was also something I wanted to implement Saab. Maybe that's my Italian side. But, you know, the Saab show cars of the Maurer, Anthony Lowe era, which were all really beautiful, they were very ice cold. Everything was white and gray, and, you know, with that ice blue, which is very cool. And I think it was a great statement. Again, because we were going for something a bit more brash, I wanted to be able to bring in some of those fun colors, you know, so those bright oranges, and you know, have that be contrasting with the cooler colors.
Do you think all these physical buttons and things, gear shifts, or whatever it is, do you think the car industry will come back to that? Because
yeah, I think we have to. You know, I think that, look, the revolution that Tesla created with the Model S, with this giant iPad essentially in the middle of the interior, was really cool and really groundbreaking. And make no mistake, it created envy across the industry. It absolutely did. There's no car company that didn't think that wasn't pretty cool, you know, or certainly from the design and UX standpoint. However, you know, I think what we've learned is, number one, people still really like tactile things. You know, number two, if you don't really know where something is on a touch screen, it's really dangerous. So you know, if you're sitting there like searching, or you're double clicking something that's haptic and it's not responding, and that's a frustration that I think anybody that's driven any modern car with touch screens has dealt with, or haptics on the wheel. So thankfully, and I'll say thankfully for once, you know, because we always kind of try to fight against some legislation, of course, that makes our lives more difficult. But, you know, certainly I think that Europe has done the right thing, where Europe is going to reinstitute that you have to have your main controls that are physical. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And as also, look, from a designer and a UX, a user experience standpoint, it also makes sense, because when you just have a touch screen, you know, there's not a lot of jewelry you can put into the interior, you know, and I think we all want something tactile, something we can feel, the ability to design something and, again, differentiate it from another product. Whereas when it's a touchscreen, it kind of becomes like your phone. It seems like everybody has the same phone and the same apps. And, you know, we've got the Squircle form, and you press the Squircle and your app comes up. So I like that, you know, we actually are taking a step backwards. Certainly you've seen in the world of performance vehicles, this hunger for a manual transmission again, which I think is really, which is really fascinating. And you're seeing the values of older manual transmission cars from the 80s, 2000s absolutely skyrocket. Because of the again, that visceral feel. I think that, you know, when you move from a world where 600 horsepower was a lot of power, and we could barely control that 600 horsepower, to now cars having over 1,000 horsepower and having the electronics that can control that horsepower, the experience has actually lost something. You know, it's become very aesthetic. And look, EVs obviously changed the game first, but now even the gas hybrid super performance cars are doing that. And, you know, those dual clutch gearboxes essentially do what an EV does. It tries to hide the shift. It tries to just give you the seamless power. So now, you know, the customers are speaking, right? And diehard and auto enthusiasts are like, no, I want a manual. And, you know, Porsche's been very smart to go back and introduce that into many of their cars, and BMW's kept it, and, you know, a handful of other brands have kept a manual or two. But it's not going to surprise me if we see more of that coming in the future.
Yeah, we should.
So, you know, so with the Saab 9.3, you know, and again, I think, you know, these upper sketches actually tell a good story. You know, we're starting with that Saab kind of volume, and then what we did with the Phoenix, and then obviously stretching that and growing it to be a 5-door hatch. And so that was really what we wanted to do. We wanted to kind of bring back that 900-esque stance and aesthetic, but in a really thoroughly, you know, modern way. Here's some images of the production version of the interior, which again, you know, captures this kind of floating shells that embrace the, you know, the cockpit. We were very ahead at the time, actually. You know, we were tracking to be, I think, first to market with an Android system in the vehicle.
Yeah.
You know, which again, this was going to be a big innovation on the user experience side, which was very interesting. And then, you know, this was the final, you know, this was near A-class surfacing of the production vehicle. And you can see here that the similarities in the, you know, the frontal volumes, the nose, that kind of very aerospace bullet-like nose, the lamps, of course, for production purposes at the time had to grow, that blade that runs from the grill through the lamp, that body that tapers back, the hips, that gave the car, you know, some real stance. And, you know, here was the, one second, sorry. Let's see here. Yeah, you can see the side view here. You know, this was, again, you know, trying to bring in, you know, same size wheel and tires as the Phoenix show car. You know, obviously this car a bit taller and quite a bit longer. We had achieved, you know, also with this car under a 2.6 CX at the time, which we were really, really proud about. And these are actually two pictures of the design models. And so, you know, one of the challenges we had here, that wasn't done on the previous Gen 9.3 was we wanted to have the same exact bumpers front and rear, to have even more carryover, and same lamps front and rear. And we did that very successfully. So this was one of the kind of the cost-saving elements we were able to implement on the design side by being, you know, very disciplined in ensuring that, you know, these cars were going to have as much carryover as possible. And that's a, you know, more dynamic. I might have a couple more images of this. I'll try to find. Hold on. Let's see. This was the X version. One moment. I'll pull this up. A toughened off-roady version. Yeah. So this had a higher ride height, and then we added the cladding and your skid plates front and rear. And this was really, you know, kind of ahead of its time. I mean, Audi was doing this with the Allroad, you know, which was very successful. And this was basically our interpretation of a similar type product. And now, as you know, these kind of in between, not quite SUV, not quite sedan, not quite rally car, you know, aesthetics are very, very popular. You know, and we felt really strongly about this product. This was quite cool, actually.
How far from production in time do you think that the new 9.3 was? If you had managed to survive, how long more would you have needed to survive to have the car out on the street?
So Mats can speak to this, and Mats and Jorgen can speak to this better than I, because they had the final timing in their hands. From our perspective, from design, we were ready to sign off on these. Were near Class A. So to be frank, you know, we could have been, you know, our goal, believe it or not, actually, I'll tell you what our original goal was. When we started the program, we were going to be 28 months to production, which was unheard of. No one had done that. Not even the Chinese had done that. That was the goal. That was the goal. So that's the goal that we in design worked to. So we had hit our marks to do that. And that's why you see such a final product. Now, whether or not the rest of engineering could have filled in all the gaps and certification and crash testing and everything that has to happen. But listen, I think that Mats and Jorgen had a really good handle on it. I believe if the cash had arrived, I believe they could have gotten there. And look, maybe it becomes 36 months, but still 36 months from zero with an all new car at that time in history was pretty impressive, you know. And again, it showed how this really small team of great people worked really hard to try to just do the impossible. And look, I mean, all you have to do is look at the success of everybody who left there. Mats went on to do great things with Scania and Volvo. A lot of the designers went to Volvo, and Volvo's done amazing between Volvo and Polestar, and obviously the Geely Group in general have done lots of beautiful things. I think a lot of very high quality people came out of the organization, and they all, I think, benefited from this Phoenix adventure, and the Spiker adventure, and then took those learnings with them elsewhere.
Yeah, it makes you glad and sad.
Yeah, it's always bittersweet, it's because again, especially if you really love Saab, which again, as I know you guys do, and certainly the people I worked with love Saab, and I as I said, I love Saab. I grew up with Saabs. We wanted nothing more than to see this thing succeed, and made a lot of sacrifices to try to make it succeed.
Yeah. These cars were not as much of a doctor car. This was more like a younger, more sporty Saab version.
Yes. Yeah, correct. We were really shooting for a younger generation consumer, and I said it in a couple interviews at the time. There were two things that stood out to me about Saab. One when I was younger, which was, certainly here in the U.S., and certainly where I grew up in the New York metropolitan area. Believe it or not, in that era of, let's call it the heyday of the 80s into the 80s into the early 90s, when there was a pretty big wealth explosion here. The young guy, the young finance guy, or the young doctor or lawyer, or the young fill in the blank, but young, kind of what were referred to as yuppies back in the day, the young upwardly mobile professional. They had a choice. It was, okay, am I going to buy like a 944 Porsche, or am I going to buy a Saab? Like that. It was really head to head with Porsche. And people forget that now, and people forget how quick those 911 those 900 turbos were back in the day, and how cool the SPG was. By the way, I still want to get an SPG. I still have to find one. I haven't found a good one yet. But that was what I wanted to capture. I wanted to say we have to get a young guy or young woman who comes out of gets their first promotion, and they're 30 years old, and they go, I'm not going to buy a BMW or an Audi this time. I'm going to buy this Saab because there's an energy behind it, and there's some passion behind it, and it's different. And I want it because it's different. And that was why we wanted to lean back into Saab being different. Saab is a really unique brand. And I think that was what we really all loved about Victor coming in, being, again, such an astute historian and cultured in automotive design, that he really respected and understood what made Saab great. And it wasn't trying to be Audi or BMW or Mercedes or Volvo. And those are all fantastic brands, and they all do what they do fantastically well. But Saab always did something kind of different. And so, this was literally the zig to everybody else's zag. And that's what we wanted for it.
So what was the future for the 9.2 and the 9.7 maybe, or whatever? What more models were you thinking about?
So, yeah, we spoke about, with the Phoenix platform, we did a design exercise. I unfortunately don't have the material with me today. I might be able to find a 9.2 package if I look hard enough. But what we talked about was, how could we keep that bandwidth from, let's call it 4.3 meters for a 9.2, so let's call it Mini Cooper sized, right, all the way up to 5.2 meters for a 9.7. So something that, well, at the time would have been BMW 7 Series size or S-Class size. But today, believe it or not, that's like a 5 Series. Cars have just grown so much over the last 10, 15 years. It's incredible. But that was the bandwidth. It was, because obviously 9.5 had just entered production. So we weren't about to touch 9.5. It was 9.3 was always going to be the bread and butter. And then should 9.3 be successful, as we believed it would be, then we really wanted to try to go to a smaller vehicle. We really felt we could do something very cool in that, 9.2/Sonett space, of having, and look, successful Mini's been over the last 15 years in building the brand and building out different models in these smaller segments. And I think that would have been a great place for Saab to play. I think getting up into a big saloon, I think less Saab to begin with, just in terms of the character and the philosophy behind the product, and B, you're chasing, you're chasing the people who really, that is their bread and butter. BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Lexus in America, now Genesis, incredibly well-funded, incredibly, successful companies that it would have been harder for Saab to compete there. I think had Saab focused 9.3 and 9.2, I think we would have had a lot of success. Yeah. So
you think Saab would have survived if you had the chance to continue for 3 more years?
I believe firmly, the manner in which the business case worked out, what we knew is we had a steady, let's call it this, almost guaranteed 80,000 car sales with a 9.3. And so Saab's business plan, if I recall correctly, again, this is, I'm dating myself now because this is a long time ago. I want to say our goal was to get up to 120,000 cars total. So if you figured that 9.5 and 9.4X, remember, we also had the 9.4X at the time, which actually was a really good vehicle. That was my last company car, and I quite liked it, actually.
Yeah, I drove
yeah, so those 2 vehicles would have handled about 30,000 units between the 2 of them, between the 9.5 and the 9.4X. Maybe if we did really great job, 40,000, because the 9.4X SUVs were really taking off at that moment. So I think the 9.4X didn't even more. And then you figure you're 70 to 80,000 9.3, and we're right there. We're full capacity, for Trollhättan, for what the factory could do, and be profitable. And we would have been a profitable company at that point. Again, if I'm recalling all the numbers correctly. But I think that anything we added to that would have been the cherry on the sundae. So were we able to be successful and continue to ship 80,000 9.3s a year? I believe a 9.2 would have come. Now maybe that would have been a tougher market. Again, you're against some lower cost providers. Very ambitious companies. Obviously, the world's also now changed with China, so that dynamic's changed as well. But look, certainly, our mission was to get 9.3 on the road in the 3 years. Had we done that, I think we would have had a successful product. This is at the Saab Design Center when we were doing a design review. Here you can see quite clearly the 9.3 convertible. It's a very gray day, unfortunately, so you're not getting the breakup of the shoulder. You see it better on the hatchback here. But the challenge here was the deck line, the rear deck line for the convertible roof is quite high, and we wanted to maintain the same belt line for the to have exactly the same carryover door, and then have the exact same rear lamp and rear bumper, which the old 9.3 did not do. So the old 9.3 had additional manufacturing complexity and cost, development cost. One of our goals to do that. We also wanted to make sure we could hit the same aero targets, which we were able to successfully do. Wow. And this gives you a better image of the front. We did we had two bumpers. One was more aggressive, which was mounted here on the hatchback, and then the other big change, apart from the slight variation in the base front bumper design that you see, or the more elegant bumper design you see on the convertible, is we were also doing the aluminum finish on the A-pillar and windshield bow, which again, hard to see in this image, unfortunately, because it's a silver car with an aluminum finished A-pillar. But as you know, we were doing the blackout visor, of course, on the hatchback.
These models were made in Trollhättan.
These were made in Trollhättan. Yeah, these were the actual clay models that we milled off of our CAD data. But then I do know there were a couple of actual prototypes of these vehicles. I don't know what happened to those though. Other than obviously the Phoenix show car, which again we took one and we shortened it. So this was the vehicle architecture study for these are the competitor sets. The Volvo, the Audi, the VW Scirocco at the time. So these 2+2s, and you can actually see the green overlay is our 9.2. It's so where we were. So we were a little tighter, obviously, in luggage capacity. Than say, a Scirocco or the Volvo, a little bit better than the TT. So that was kind of, where this was going to fit proportionately when this market still existed. Although this market of the small kind of 2+2 coupe or 4-seat coupe has kind of gone away a bit.
Yes. Do you have images of this car as well? 9.2?
I don't have images. Well, I did have CAD images and I couldn't find them. I think as I said, they're on a hard drive somewhere.
Yeah.
There may be one or two online though, because at some point I remember doing an interview with somebody years ago, and we showed a couple of those images online of the 9.2. Let me see if I can. Maybe if I put it in my search, I'll find it.
Of course, yeah.
You never know. You never know. I'm not sharing anything right now, right? No. Okay.
Right. But what you are,
I can share. There is an article on the website Saab Planet. So
yes, maybe that was the one. There it is. Yeah. Okay, you found it. Okay, there it is, right there. So that's the production. That was the production variant of the Phoenix. So call that the new Sonett. And the 9.2 would have essentially been that same car, but with a little bit more luggage space and bigger back seat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the front end architecture, the beauty of this platform was that we were able to, maintain that same front end architecture. We had gotten the overhang. We weren't, don't get me wrong, we weren't at BMW or Mini Cooper level, but we were able to split the difference, and get that overhang more contained. Some of the overhang length actually is on us in design, who wanted a bit more of that rounder plan view. So you inherently do have to grow a little bit. But we had that front end architecture that worked for 9.3 and 9.2. Same thing with the H point. And so basically the car from B pillar forward was always the same. And then we were just kind of lengthening the wheelbase or shortening the wheelbase as needed to give you these variations.
Did you do a big SUV as well?
Some other images in this article as well. Did you, if you go, is there like a photo gallery? Oh, there we go.
There,
yeah.
They're beautiful.
Here's the 9.2 concept here in the gold one, the bronze one. Mm. So this was a more, let's call it, in Italian, we use the word simpatico, which means kind of kind. So kind, friendly, more kinder, friendly face. So, a bit bigger eyes, and wanted to tap more into the spirit of the early 9.2 Saab. So you also get that colored side marker, along after the lamp. And then the Sonett, had these kind of buttresses, but more similar to the treatment that I did on the Ferrari 599, where you can see that teardrop canopy tuck under the buttresses, and the buttresses are these aerodynamic planes that come and sit on the rear. So if you scroll up to the red vehicle, again, you'll see that. Yeah, you can go to the top view. One more. Yeah, there we go. So you can see that there very clearly. Hmm. So that was conceptually, bringing Phoenix to production in a more rational, industrializable way.
Mm-hmm. Very sporty and strong.
Yeah,
and bold.
Yeah, it would have been a fun product. I mean, this was definitely the last product we would have done. The 9.2 was the one that Victor was really excited about after 9.3, and understandably so. To have kind of a small 4.3 meter. 4-seater with a couple hundred horsepower, torque vectoring. It would have been quite a fun little car.
So when did you stop working for Saab?
So I worked for Saab all the way up to the day Victor declared bankruptcy. Huh. We stayed in the fight, for better or for worse, because we really believed in it, and we certainly hoped that on the heels of that, a new suitor would come. And Nevs came along, but Nevs ultimately had different plans. So yes, there's certainly a lot of Saab DNA in Nevs, but obviously they took a different street from here. I think ultimately, and again, you'd have to ask Victor and Mats. I think that there were just some challenges around IP tie-ups and things of that nature that made it difficult to continue this in the form it was in.
But these designs are yours still.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And what you are working with today, you will not share today.
Well, so we're working on some interesting things. I really kind of shifted gears and focused much more on automotive manufacturing. And so we've been, I have a team, and we've been working quietly behind the scenes on some interesting innovations around manufacturing to bring down the cost of manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was part of the lessons I learned at Saab. Actually, it was that seeing you can have all these great ideas, but if you can't make it financially viable, it doesn't really matter. So, my education, from Saab onwards was really fantastic. I spent 10 years in Italy, really enjoying learning anything and everything I could about design. And then moved really the next 10 years was really more in branding and marketing, beginning with Saab and then running my own consultancy. And then I was at Ford for 5.5 years, where I moved from design into strategy, into business strategy. And, my 5.5 years at Ford, where I ended up being global brand director for electric vehicles, was a really fantastic education. And again, working in, one of the biggest, most storied automotive companies in the world, and history, of course. So really fascinating, group of experiences, from working for, Carrozzeria in Italy, working with these small iconic brands, and then also at the same time working with these new upcoming Chinese brands, to then, working with the Saab, to then consulting many different companies, and then being an executive at Ford. It's been a really fascinating journey for me. Very incredible what the Chinese auto industry has done. It really is. Yeah.
It is. It's amazing. And I think they are good at the design as well, but they have help from a lot of Western designers as well, if you may say.
Listen, I think they've done a fantastic job of bringing in great talent, and learning, and then developing their own talent, which, they've taken the page right out of what, the Japanese did, the Koreans did, and now the Chinese have done. And the interesting thing is to see that continued compression of time. You could argue it took the great Japanese automakers about 40 years to build like truly world-class product. Hyundai, Kia, Genesis Group did it probably in, I'd say, about 25, and the Chinese have done it in 15. The learning just keeps getting faster. And then, you have the benefit, of course, of just massive industrial might put behind it, because the government obviously, noted that, look, the auto sector is an important sector. We're going to do everything we can to win in this sector. And so it's incredible what they've done. It really is. For many people who haven't experienced, high quality Chinese cars, they're really very, very impressive.
They are. So what do you think about how have electricity changed the car design?
I'm a big fan of electric cars. So, I never thought I'd say that, because I was such a gasoline for blood guy. I started my life, drawing Ferraris, and one of my favorite fun stories to share is that, my cousin actually went to Stanford with a lot of the early people from Tesla. And, for years she was trying to get me to meet a bunch of them. And I said, why do I want to meet these guys? I work with Ferrari, Ferrari is, this whole other thing. And then my, Franz, who's a friend of mine, became head of design there, has done a fantastic job, of course. I've learned to embrace electric cars, and my son really turned me on to them, and again, being a creator, you always have to look to what does the new generation really want? Because at a certain point, you stop being the customer. So I can like what I like, and I'm going to purchase what I'm going to purchase. But when you talk about big movements and big shifts in buying power, it always happens with the younger generation. So, when my son was about 6 or 7 years old, he had this kind of closet love of Tesla that he wasn't admitting to me, because Tesla was like, non grata in my household. He really turned me on to them, because I looked at him one day. I said, what is it about Tesla? Why do you like Tesla so much? Don't you like Ferrari and Maserati and these really cool Italian brands? And he kind of looked at me and he's just like, it's just cooler. And that really hit me, like a wood spoon twisted into my heart. Because oh my God, I raised my kid all wrong. Like, what happened? But no, jokes aside, I realized that, okay, I'm not the customer anymore, and I really embraced EVs at that point and learned everything I could about them. And that was why when I was at Ford and I got promoted into that position to really help forward the EV strategy, That was fantastic, and to be part of Mustang Mach-E, which was like Phoenix, kind of an equally controversial and divisive product, but became very successful. Was the best-selling EV in North America for 4 years in a row behind the Teslas. Again, Tesla's a tough nut to crack. Tesla has a pretty good corner in the market still, regardless of what people think. It's an incredibly impressive company with lots of great people. And long story short, what I love for design and for products is that EV really does open up a lot of possibilities. And you've heard about that from other designers, and certainly at auto shows every now and then there'd be something really radically different. I think we've kind of almost left behind the science project era of EV, and now everybody's just focused on making really cool, nice looking EVs. There was that moment where there was a lot of weird things happening in EV design because, oh, look what all this freedom we have, and now we can do all these things we couldn't do before. That all still exists, but I think where companies have come to realize is that we've got to get the overall acceptance of the product, because there is some differentiation obviously in ownership of the product and how you use the product. Get that learning curve, get the technology point to that, A, the cost comes down, and B, the inconveniences of the longer charging times and things of this nature are minimized. And then you can again begin to experiment really broadly. So I think it's interesting. It's a pendulum. It swung from the science project extreme to, hey, let's just do a beautiful car. Look on the road, there's a lot of really pretty cars that are EVs, but you wouldn't know they were an EV. They're not saying I'm an EV. Whereas in the early days, it was like, I'm an EV, it was really weird looking. And, we would call them the science project cars.
Well, really bold when you did the Phoenix show car.
It was considered super, I laughed that it was considered so controversial at the time. One magazine even called it the wrong car. It's like, wow. Okay. I don't take any of this stuff to heart. I always underline, guys, we're not curing cancer here. This is car design. You can be passionate about it, and I enjoy that. I would much rather someone have that very strong opinion either way, because to me, as a creator, the last opinion you want is someone to be like, yeah, it's okay. You want someone to feel something, and that can be, I don't like it or I don't get it, and that's okay. And certainly, again, when you look at through the lens of really what the goal of that project was to change the narrative around Saab, to stop getting asked, are we going to survive, and start getting people to talk about the future, whether that's a future they like or not. But that was really the goal, and it absolutely crushed that goal. So from our standpoint, it was a huge success. And by the way, a couple magazines and a couple journalists really did appreciate it. And certainly in the design community, there were people that came and they said, wow, that's really cool. And that's great. And on to the next one. That's the beauty too. If you look at the arc of your career, regardless of what you do, as a designer, maybe it's easier to trace because there's products you're associated with. It's one product in 25-year career. Can't believe it's that long now. 25 years into my career. So it was about halfway in my career, where also, prior to that, I was doing a lot of very classically beautiful things. So I also wanted to go through a period of doing things that were more extreme. So it was also a personal decision to say, I'm going to push further. The project I did right before that was for Bertone. It was also very controversial at the time. The Montade, which was a very extreme, kind of wedge layered on wedge sports car. And now, again, that's another product that people have come back to me today. I actually was at an auto show. There was an auto show recently here where they had a bunch of my vehicles. I was there, and people were like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" When is this coming out? I was like, "Oh no, that was from 2008." Like 18 years ago. So it's just it's fun to see how over time people's opinions of things change, and when you do something that is maybe just very classically beautiful at the time, it's not really appreciated, and then the years go by and it becomes more appreciated. I mentioned the Model S before. I think when the Model S came out, everybody said, "Oh yeah, that's like a really handsome car." It's just that, someone finally did an EV that's not a science project. Now you go back, it's 13 years on the road. You go, wow, that's still a really handsome car. Like that. Chapeau for Franz. I mean, he did a beautiful car, and that's what great car design does. It's going to create opinion. And some things are going to age better than others. I think that's just the nature of life.
Great. I really enjoyed this. Is it something else you would like to add to the Saab story, or something you would share?
Now, it's the irony of sob story is not lost on you guys, right? Because in America, in English, we say sob story when it's a sad story.
Yeah, it's
so I just the irony of the fact that we call this a sob story is really just it cuts me like a knife.
Yeah,
but it was listen, it was I'm not gonna lie, it was a real roller coaster. It was so euphoric when we started, and then it was the fall was so precipitous, so painful, and it took a long time to get out of that, because it's just there was so much heart and soul put into that by people, and it was really devastating. And look, it's not lost on any of us that you're talking about a company that had thousands of people that all had to go home. And I understand that they had the good fortune of being in a country that does a very good job of taking care of their people when these things happen. But having said that, the thing that always sat with me is, speaking with a lot of the people that I became closer with there, these are all people who love to have purpose. No one wants to get sent home and be paid to stay home. Nobody. Certainly not there. Certainly not the people I worked with. And they were very sad because they were, some of them have been at Saab for 20, 25 years. And others were younger, like yourself, Anders, who just started. So it was a very painful thing, and I think for automotive in general, I think it was a very sad loss, because I think Saab was really one of the more characterful, iconic, interesting brands, and there's just not enough of that today. We have these great brands and these iconic brands, but it seems like now that the new Saabs are really the EV startups, right? They're these kind of quirky in their way. Tesla started that way, and now Tesla's obviously a juggernaut, but it started with humble beginnings, right? And Rivian and others who are carving their way, trying to create something unique and differentiated, and I give them a lot of credit for that. I guess that's the new generation. It's as we mentioned earlier, it's a shame Saab couldn't traverse that, and not even Nevs. So Nevs had some of that. I would have hoped and preferred that it just stayed Saab, but I know that wasn't for obviously political, legal reasons, wasn't possible.
Yes.
Which again, yeah.
Anders, do you have some more questions?
No, not really a question, but I think it's interesting that you mentioned this roller coaster of feelings, that you experienced it on your side of Saab. And I can tell you, I experienced exactly the same roller coaster on the engineering side. So
yeah,
it's amazing to hear. But
we fought, we fought a good fight, and I think if you speak with Mats, when I hope you do, and Victor, they'll reiterate that exact same point, that that and again, we're the ones that take the brunt of it, or get to talk with you guys. But again, it was everybody who was there was really trying, hoping to make this thing a success. And again, it wasn't lost on any of us the weight of that, of trying to make this thing work that we really all believed in and knew could work. And that's the disappointment. And it was one of the greatest lessons I ever had. I learned two big lessons that I passed to my son. One is really about asymmetrical information. You need to really understand things from multiple views. I certainly in my exuberance in the moment was just looking at it from, if I just have if I could just have the time and the budget to just do something really cool, we're going to make this work. And the naivete around that, being young in the business still, and not understanding there were a lot of other pieces to the puzzle that I didn't know enough about. Now, in hindsight, had I known as much as I knew about all those things, I probably wouldn't have taken the job. So sometimes that ignorance is bliss, and it's a good thing, because I'm glad I took the job, because ultimately the greatest lesson I learned was all the failures there and what to look out for in the future, and how I can help a company avoid those things. And that's what also allowed me to increase my, let's call it, automotive IQ and industry IQ, and then begin to focus on other sectors. And so, whereas as I mentioned earlier, I spent 10 years really that kind of classic 10,000 hour role of overnight success, 10 years of just focusing on design, and then really learning about branding and marketing, and then really learning about manufacturing and supply chain and just strategy, and continuing to grow that skill set. It now allows me to really look at things with a far more impartial lens, which is important. And I think that it doesn't stop my passion and wanting to see a great company succeed, or a great idea succeed, and putting weight behind that. But you know maybe more of the questions to ask before you dive head in.
So this was really interesting and entertaining for me. It was super nice.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's great to talk about.
Really nice to hear all these things, and as you said, you get a little bit sad, but you're also glad. And Saab Andan, the Saab spirit is still alive. I can assure you, in Trollhättan in Sweden, it's still alive. People are having the same passion for different things, and for Saab.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly in the collector community, Saab will, I think, maintain its interest and its passion. I think what we need is a really cool Saab resto mod. That resto mod market's on fire right now, so I think I'll be happy to participate. Make some like really cool modern Saab 900 SPG with like 900 horsepower or something, and a manual. That could be a lot of fun.
I think we need a Phoenix on the road, not just
that would be very cool too. I'm not going to complain if that happens. So if you can make that happen, I'll be happy to help.
Yeah,
that's a goal.
Definitely. Okay, I will stop the interview or stop the recording.
Okay, so thank you very much for this interview. It was super nice.
Thank you, guys.
Very generous of you.
Some things are going to age better than others. I think that's just the nature of life.
Great. I really enjoyed this. Is it something else you would like to add to the Saab story, or something you would share?
Yes. Now it's the irony of Saab story is not lost on you guys, right? Because in America, in English, we say Saab story when it's a sad story.
Yeah, it's sad.
So so I just the irony of the fact that we call this a Saab story is really just it cuts me like a knife.
Yeah.
But it was listen, it was I'm not gonna lie, it was a real roller coaster. It was so euphoric when we started, and then it was the fall was so precipitous, so painful, and it took a long time to get out of that, because it's just there was so much heart and soul put into that by people, and it was really devastating. And look, it's not lost on any of us that you're talking about a company that had thousands of people that all had to go home. And I understand that they had the good fortune of being in a country that does a very good job of taking care of their people when these things happen. But having said that, the thing that always sat with me is, speaking with a lot of the people that I became closer with there, these are all people who love to have purpose. No one wants to get sent home and be paid to stay home. Nobody. Certainly not there. Certainly not the people I worked with. And they were very sad because they were, some of them have been at Saab for 20, 25 years. And others were younger, like yourself, Anders, who just started. So it was a very painful thing, and I think for automotive in general, I think it was a very sad loss, because I think Saab was really one of the more characterful, iconic, interesting brands, and there's just not enough of that today. We have these great brands and these iconic brands, but it seems like now the new Saabs are really the EV startups, right? They're these kind of quirky in their way. Tesla started that way, and now Tesla's obviously a juggernaut, but it started with humble beginnings, right? And Rivian and others who are carving their way, trying to create something unique and differentiated, and I give them a lot of credit for that. I guess that's the new generation. It's as we mentioned earlier, it's a shame Saab couldn't traverse that, and not even Nevs. So Nevs had some of that. I would have hoped and preferred that it just stayed Saab, but I know that wasn't for obviously political, legal reasons, wasn't possible.
Yes.
Which again, yeah.
Anders, do you have some more questions?
No, not really a question, but I think it's interesting that you mentioned this roller coaster of feelings, and that you experienced it on your side of Saab. And I can tell you, I experienced exactly the same roller coaster on the engineering side. So
yeah,
it's amazing to hear. But
we fought, we fought a good fight, and I think if you speak with Mats, when I hope you do, and Victor, they'll reiterate that exact same point, that that and again, we're the ones that take the brunt of it, or get to talk with you guys. But again, it was everybody who was there was really trying, hoping to make this thing a success, and again, it wasn't lost on any of us, the weight of that, of trying to make this thing work that we really all believed in and knew could work. And that's the disappointment. And, you know, it was one of the greatest lessons I ever had. I learned two big lessons that I passed to my son. One is really about asymmetrical information. You know, you need to really understand things from multiple views. I certainly, in my exuberance in the moment, was just looking at it from, oh yeah, if I could just have the time and the budget to just do something really cool, we're going to make this work. And you know, that naivete around that, being young in the business still, and not understanding there were a lot of other pieces to the puzzle that I didn't know enough about. Now, in hindsight, had I known as much as I knew about all those things, I probably wouldn't have taken the job. So sometimes that ignorance is bliss, and it's a good thing, because I'm glad I took the job, because, you know, ultimately the greatest lesson I learned was all the failures there and what to look out for in the future, and how I can help, you know, a company avoid those things. And that's what also allowed me to increase my, let's call it, automotive IQ and industry IQ, and then begin to focus on other sectors. And so, whereas, as I mentioned earlier, I spent, you know, 10 years really that kind of classic, you know, 10,000 hour rule of overnight success, 10 years of just focusing on design, and then really learning about branding and marketing, and then really learning about manufacturing and supply chain and just strategy, and continuing to grow that skill set. It now, you know, allows me to, you know, really look at things with a far more impartial lens, which is important. And I think that, you know, it doesn't stop my passion and wanting to see a great company succeed, or a great idea succeed, and putting weight behind that. But you know, maybe more of the questions to ask before you dive head in.
Great. So this was really interesting and entertaining for me. It was super nice.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's great to talk about.
Really nice to hear all these things, and as you said, you get a little bit sad, but you're also glad. And Saab, the Saab spirit is still alive. I can assure you, in Trollhättan in Sweden, it's still alive. People are having the same passion for different things, and for Saab.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly in the collector community, Saab will, I think, maintain its interest and its passion. I think what we need is a really cool Saab resto mod. To, you know, that resto mod market's on fire right now. So I think I'll be happy to participate, you know, make some like really cool modern Saab 900 SPG with like 900 horsepower or something, you know, and a manual. You know, that could be a lot of fun.
I think we need a Phoenix on the road. Not just
that would be very cool too. I'm not going to complain if that happens. So if you can make that happen, I'll be happy to help.
Yeah.
That's a goal.
Definitely. Okay, I will stop the interview, or stop the recording.
Okay, so thank you very much for this interview. It was super nice.
Thank you, guys.
Very generous of you.